Hello. So for this semester for my field experience, I was fortunate enough to go to the Newburgh Dundee Police Department. So kind of talking about a overview of my placement. As I had mentioned, I worked with the Newburgh Dundee Police, and what that kind of included is doing ride-alongs with the police once a week, and I would do it on Fridays and then kind of rotating between different police officers. I had three different rotations. What was kind of fortunate but also unfortunate is I only did hours of 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. And so I wasn't able to see too much hardcore crime because a lot of that happens when we kind of are all sleeping. But I was able to see that Newburgh actually has a lot of police support, and the community at the police station was very high. Everyone really supported each other. Every officer really enjoyed working in each other's company, and they really had very high things to say about their supervisors, each one of them. And I think that was really cool to see. And then my police officers also varied in age. The youngest one who I had worked with was 24, but then the oldest one who I've worked with was 56. And I also know officers who are a little bit younger, know officers who are a little bit older than that, um, just in general. So yeah. So kind of reviewing my activities, I would do ride-alongs and assist where needed. So like one time I had to hold the ticketing clipboard for a second, which was very simple. But then I also was able to hold the laser gun and help with trafficking. And I also was able to kind of learn about the different rules and regulations when it comes to traffic. And honestly, did not think there are as many as there are. And then I also was able to have conversations of what their jobs kind of entailed. So a lot of them have been working day shift, but before then they've been working swing shift, which is that 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. window. And honestly, they said there's a lot more crime, and just I was able to talk about how they individually would deal with each situation and which honestly they preferred. And I thought it was very good. And then I also was able to have a couple conversations about faith with a couple of my officers because um a, two out of the three of them are religious, but we can get into that later. So each ride along would be different. So some would be slower shifts where we're just doing traffic and just driving around looking to see if there's anything suspicious or anything wrong. But then also we'd have faster shifts where we're responding to multiple calls. Like we had a call about a lost dog who wasn't really there. And then we had a call about a house getting broken into. And then we had a call about someone stealing something. And then so it was just multiple calls that are happening all at once. And were able to kind of just go back and forth. And it was interesting because for that specific day that I'm kind of referencing for my faster shifts, we had to kind of bounce between Newburgh and Dundee, and obviously it's not like a super long drive, but those 10 minutes can kind of add up. And then just learning about the different laws, I thought was pretty interesting. I didn't realize you couldn't drink in public. I guess that makes a lot of sense. I also didn't realize that you could pull someone over who doesn't signal in a certain amount of time, just like that. And some officers do that because a couple of them usually have warrants against their arrest. So if they mess up, they can easily pull them over. And then also just observing police dealing with the kind of more emotional patrons, like elderly or even teenagers who had been pulled over for speeding, is definitely ones that stick in my mind because I know they are very emotional and they are just not knowing what they did wrong. And then also just the police responding to every single call. They respond to the lost dogs, as I mentioned, but they also respond to lost children or lost keys even. They'll kind of respond to everything, big or small. They don't just respond to lost things, but that's just something that I was referencing. So my personal reactions to this experience. So honestly, before this semester, I did fear the police. There's been a lot of police brutality recently in our country, and then also, I live pretty close to the LA area, and especially in high school, I was just wondering what was going on during COVID and during all these protests and such. And are these people a group of people who I should be fearful of? Um, but now looking back at it, they do more behind the scenes than we know. The community police, especially responding to every single call, big or small. Um, because people who lost their phones, they'll return it to them. Whereas if you're in a big city, your phone did not get turned in by the police and it's definitely not coming back to you. They're very personable. They know their regulars around the town, especially of the homeless population, and they check in and make sure that they're doing good and even trying to encourage them to get their life right and get a job or just do something more with their life. And then what also I kind of was in shock of is that they are pretty desensitized from the work. They kind of go on side tangents or side conversations during big cases. For example, we did have a scenario where it's pretty big and there are multiple police officers, but everyone is kind of just standing around and having simple conversations while two officers were at work questioning. And I think it's just having backup and not saying that they were distracted, but just almost creating an environment where it can still be livable. And then I was also intrigued with knowing that every shift will be different and that none of them are the same, slow, fast, medium, big cases, little cases. It just all varies. So these are my goals that I had written down, my original goals, and I think that I've met them. So learning how the police have handled citizens during times of worry and how to stay calm, cool, and collected. Um, Many citizens do freak out just in general when someone's broken in or someone's gotten something stolen and the police are pretty calm, cool, collected. They have the questions lined up, they have all the information they need, so they're just coming to ask the questions to get everything figured out. But they're also I also found that I was able to identify tendencies within citizens, and when they get even pulled over as simple as like traffic, um, people tend to freak out. They forget where things are. They have their idea on them. It just takes them a little longer, or even they'll result to rambling and they'll take a lot longer than they need to. But I think I also met the goal of gaining experience of what someone with a non-psychology degree does when dealing with a person who has psychological issues. There have been cases where we had to deal with someone who has schizophrenia, and it was very interesting seeing the officer kind of being the front line because they're homeless and they don't have the treatment they need or they don't have the resources that they could potentially have if they had more funds. It was definitely interesting because they're just trying to talk to him like he's human, like he's worth it, and that he should still try to turn his life around and that there is more at the end of the tunnel, basically. But so I did definitely learn a lot from that. So kind of going of what my past prior coursework was. So kind of talking a little bit about adolescent development. I feel like that I learned how to kind of understand teenagers and what they're going through, and especially when a teenager gets pulled over for traffic, they think it's the end of the world and like they're going to jail, when that's simply not the case, but it's definitely that fight or flight in them. And then counseling, having an officer be an amazing active listener and be very intentional and be very good at asking the right questions, but also being able to listen and being able to be there, I thought was very interesting. I did add human sexuality, which is definitely a course that kind of stood out to me. So our last call that I had for my experience, it actually was a human services case. There were two children who were eating out on the sidewalk, no papers, no nothing, eating quite literally off the floor, and they looked a little bit dirty. So the police were called, and it comes to find out the mother was a stripper and she had been at work yesterday at 3 p.m. and had not returned for her two children, and the person who was watching them was her ex-best friend's ex-boyfriend who has an ankle monitor. So definitely seemed like just a warm body to be in that house. And the place was a mess. Everything was in kind of in shambles. Questions were being asked. Mom was being contacted, but the reason why I say this is because I'd recently done research on strippers and sex work for my human sexuality class, and the biggest thing people say that they join stripping is for the financial burdens, and it kind of looked that way. I am making a huge assumption, but it looked that way. They lived in a very small place, about a one bedroom apartment, and that guy was simply over there because he could be. Um, but it didn't look like they were living off much, and it looked like she was just trying to make do with what she could, and that did result in the neglectfulness of her child, or her children, I mean. So I definitely thought that was interesting. So I did want to touch on how faith has influenced my experience. So two out of the three police officers actually attend my church. I go to a very large church, so there's about 4 to 5 services, so I don't think I'd be seeing them anytime soon. But the police are there to serve anyone and everyone. And with my police officer who I worked with, who wasn't a person of faith, I could still see that he had a very warm heart and that he still wanted to serve everyone. And I just think that has faithfulness without even saying that you have faith, that you are just trying to be a good and kind person and trying to protect this world. So it also was hard seeing like my emotional slash heartfelt side of how I deal with the situations because I feel like sometimes I can be pretty emotionally charged, but realizing they're just trying to serve our city and make the best decisions for what we think or what they think they it is dealing with the having worked with a police, it's a lot of judgment calls that they have to make and what is right for them. So, kind of an evaluation of how I can use this in related psychology fields. So, my goal is to be a marriage and family therapist, but working with the police has still taught me how to serve people no matter what, no matter if I'm on the clock or off the clock, that I can still serve people. And then also, it was definitely interesting having a lens of being a protector. They are the front line of what most people do or who most people call when there is a situation that goes awry. So I think that was definitely interesting. And they're also able to just keep the city safe. Keeping the city safe, I feel like is pretty important. It just really shows like how important it truly is, and they do more than meets the eye. So kind of concluding that with once again, just emphasizing how important police work is so important because they are the front line, they're the people working, they are just there to serve everyone. And the amount that police do that we don't even realize, I think was unfathomable when I was learning how much really goes into it. And it's not even just the police officers, it's also the people who work behind the counter, it's also the people who are in dispatch. It's just a whole system that we don't know. Or it's even them working along with the firefighters and them working along with different people I thought was important. And then also just the relationship between the officers who are they have their regulars and just making sure that they're checking in on their regulars there multiple times or I pull over and talk to someone who is on the streets typically and who they usually see and just trying to encourage them to get off the streets or trying to check in on them, see if they need anything, see what they can do. So I think doing that extra mile and going in that extra step is such an important thing. Um, but yeah, and that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.